Hi, and welcome to the Big Book Project. I'm Lori Feathers, your host, and today I'm very happy to have with us Nanci McCloskey. Nanci is with Tin House Books on the West Coast. She's associate publisher and director of sales and marketing there, and we are here to launch our Big Book Project read of Ahat by Marlene van Niekerk. Hey, Nanci.
Hi, it's good to see you, Lori.
It's really great to see you too. Um, I thought we would start maybe at the very beginning. Tell me how you got acquainted with this book, learned about it at Tin House. How did it come into the door?
Okay. Well, it starts with an embarrassing story because I got hired at Tin House as an editor. I came from the literary agent world. I'd been in that world for almost 10 years, and I had done some big scope editing as an agent. But when I got to Tin House and realized like what real editors did, I thought, oh no, I'm never going to be able to do this job. So I really focused on doing works in translation and reissues because I wasn't sure I could actually edit a book the way it needed to be done. And when I started, all the interns were all buzzing about this book, Agaat, which you say it correctly. I may still say it incorrectly. Marlene has corrected me that in South Africa it's pronounced Ahat. So I read it, the manuscript, and just absolutely loved it. And the agent was very, very reluctant to sell it to Tin House. I started at Tin House when Tin House was a baby. Tin House was about 2 years old when I started. So the agent really wanted to know that we would know how to do this and do it well. And I think that I was just so passionate and enthusiastic and over the moon about it that I finally convinced her, yes, please sell it to us. And she did.
So, this book was published in the UK 4 years before it came over to the US, I think. So, tell me how that happened.
We it was published under The Way of the Women was the title there. And but the agent that I worked with, she is based in the UK, but she is Marlene's agent. And we all hated that title, The Way of the Women. And Marlene said, "Me too. Please call it what it should be called." So that's what we decided to do.
And any kind of, I don't know, uh, guesses as to why it took so long to kind of get over here?
I think that people had reservations about a 650-page South African translation. There was definitely concerns that there wasn't a market for this book. And I I can I can definitely understand that, but I the psychological intensity, the line by line beauty of this book, what Marlene is capturing in this book, I I don't know how anybody could read this book and not be just absolutely stunned by its magnificent. So I
Yeah,
think they were just kind of put off by looking at the length and thinking, "Oh, we don't know how to do it."
yeah. Well, I'm hoping we can get a little bit of noise going for this book because it does seem to be kind of one of those under the wire books a little bit. No cut against Chin House's publicity and marketing efforts, but a lot of people don't know about this book, and they absolutely should because um, I just started yesterday for the project rereading the book. The first 84 pages, which we're reading this week as a group. And it's amazing. The writing is just amazing. The story and the characterization of the two women, Ahat and um, Milla, are really intriguing. But you're absolutely right. Like on a line by line just criteria, the precision of the descriptions. I was just reading, and unfortunately, I underline way too much, but she's describing this embroidery that Ahat is working on, and just the way and the precision, the detail in that description, it's just it just makes me gasp. It's so
Yeah.
beautiful.
Do you remember what it was when you were reading the book that kind of drew you in? I have such a very specific memory of the moment in that book where I went, "Oh, this is an entirely different book than I knew it was."
Well, why don't you share and I'll think about
Okay.
it?
Okay. Okay, for me, I mean, as we've been saying, the writing is beautiful. The characters are so well drawn. There was something that just kind of pulled me in right from the start. But what just made everything change for me, and I don't want to give anything away to people who are just making their way through the book, is you think because it's all from Milla's perspective. You think you know who Milla is, and there is a shift that I for me it was like a gasp out loud kind of shift. And it changed everything that I'd read before and everything that came after.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was maybe you just answered it, but I was going to ask you about the title because we you have these two very strong personalities in the book. At least Ahat as an adult is a strong personality. We get introduced to her when she's a very small child and adopted by Mila and her husband Jacob, two wealthy white South Africans who run a farm. And it's this Ahat is a pretty much abandoned, abused, poor little girl that Mila kind of adopts, at least for a while. um, why do you think the book is titled Ahat and not Mila?
Well, I do think it's a hot story. I think Milla had a hand in creating this person, a hot, or this way of being in the world. But I, she's so extraordinary. I love Mary Gateskill's introduction when she talks about a hot's capacity for love. And I think that that's really true. That even though the psychological complexity, the abuse she sustained, her role in the house shifting and changing, the way she has to view the temperature at all times of what's going on around her, and how absolutely solid she is in who she is and what she brings to this family. I mean, this farm that it we have to think about when it started. It's in the 1960s. Really, this should be the husband's farm. But Milla knows so much more about farming than her husband does that she kind of can't help but to take over. And and she should because it's kind of our family's land as well. But she's able to teach Ahat how to do this farming, and Ahat is an incredibly fast study. And this family becomes incredibly dependent on her for their survival in every way.
Yeah, when the book opens, Mila has been uh, paralyzed really by ALS, um, and she's totally dependent on a hot. But through much of the novel that we see, because of Mila thinking back and memories of both Mila and Ahat and even Jackie, the son, um, Mila was a real force of nature. The the section for this week that we read about like her marriage and how like from the get-go she was extremely ambitious. She not only wanted the farm to really succeed and entertain kind of some farming practices that Jack doesn't really agree with, but she really wants the farm to be a success, and she works really hard. She also kind of had this demeanor or this intent that she was going to be domineering, and this was going to be her legacy that she would pass down. and it's very much when she thinks about her marriage, not like, oh, we're going to do this as a couple. It's more like, oh, this is my land, this is my farm, and everything that happens is going to be part of my destiny as I'm going to will it to be.
which I felt was completely righteous on her part. Her husband is sort of a dilettante. I mean, he wasn't a hard worker. He wasn't smart about these kinds of decisions that she weighed and analyzed and thought about. And he was just kind of a man's man who liked hunting and liked his time off, and they didn't have the same sort of attention to the farm. That was my reading.
Yeah, I think he even says something to her early on, like, "Oh, you've like laid out this golden frame for me." So, like, I think he almost agrees to marry her because in some parts it doesn't seem like he's incredibly attracted to her, but he thinks it's going to be an easy life, right? I
Yeah,
mean, he's not going to have to work very hard. They're inheriting this farm and all this land, and there are already workers there doing everything. And so I think he's thinking there's not going to be very much expected of him.
right. Yeah, that was the sense that I had too. And that's just not Milla's way. I mean, you're right that she is such a force in the amount of knowledge she knows about everything from farming to embroidery to nature, and how all those details are so packed into this book is also fantastic.
Yeah, yeah. The uh, Marlene van Niekerk just must know all this stuff too, in a lot of detail. I did watch, and we made available to all the subscribers the video of the conversation between she and Toni Morrison. Tell me how Toni Morrison kind of got on the bandwagon. Was that something that you guys at Tin House did, or did she know the book when it was published in the UK?
No, I wrote to her. I wrote to her this letter. I sent her the UK copy, and I wrote this letter saying, read this book. Start, I know it's overwhelming. Start here, read this page to this page, ignore the title because it's a terrible title and we won't publish under that. And I know I'm 100% confidence that you're going to fall in love with this book. And within a week, I got a letter back from her. Might still be in my it's somewhere in the office. Yeah, she wrote me a typed a letter with a handwritten envelope saying, "You are absolutely right. I am absolutely in love with this book." She read it in 2 days after having had hip surgery and was just completely captivated by it. So then I wrote to her agent and said, "Can I quote from this letter to use it for an endorsement on the book?" And she agreed. And then quickly after that, Penn got in touch saying that they were inviting Marlene and Toni Morrison to be on the stage at Penn World Voices.
Yeah, that's amazing. But there are I can see I'm a big fan of Sula by Toni
Yeah.
Morrison. I can see some similarities here and just like the how psychological both of the books are,
Yeah.
and really getting into the heads of these women and how they think, and the combination of kind of love and manipulation that happens.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really, and it's a great interview. I think it was sponsored by Penn, right?
Yes.
Um, Tell me about kind of, you've told me that this is like, if not the one of the favorite books that you've published since you've been working with books. Um, what's it been like to kind of share your love for this book and get other readers excited about it?
I love that it still happens. I got an email from a woman just probably 3 weeks ago now, who is a retired nurse who has read the book twice back to back, loved it so much. And She was writing a letter to the author, and she was so buzzed after having finished this book, she couldn't sleep, and she had so many thoughts in her head, and she wanted to share all of these thoughts and ideas with the author, and she stayed up all night, and she was almost deranged by the time I talked to her on the phone. She was just so sleep deprived and giddy, but just y- also euphoric on just how much this book meant to her. But what I found so fascinating by it, it was so narrowed in to the medical aspect of it. That's what she was so fascinated
Ah,
by, which frankly wasn't that interesting to me at all. Like that, the kind of details about the medical, like, I couldn't even really recall them. It was all the psychological aspect for me. But so that's one recent example, and I think I told you before that I started a correspondence with a nun who lives in a convent, has taken a vow of silence, and fell in love with this book, and we've kept in touch for 10 years now, where we just check in with one another every once in a while based on this book. And booksellers that fallen in love with it, it's just cements relationships because I feel like the intensity you feel after reading it just gives you a bond with people.
yeah. Um, Marlene van Niekerk is a poet, and it's not surprising when you read this beautiful prose. Like the lyricism of it is amazing. She's also a really, really big deal in South Africa. Um, do you know a little bit about her reputation there and is she writing now? Do you know if she's working on something?
I I check in with her and her agent regularly to ask, and she always says, "You know me, Nancy. It takes me a really long time to write a book. Yes, I'm working on something. I have no idea when it'll be finished." So that's about all I know there. Yeah, I know she's a massive big deal in South Africa, and I don't think that I quite appreciated how much until we were kind of into after we had bought the book, and then I kind of understood. But she's right there with J.M. Coetzee.
Yeah. Well, I know that A Hut is her second novel. I've actually read her first one. It's not a tiny thing either.
Uh-uh.
Triumph. And I was interested. To me, these books, and it's been a while since I've read this. I read it right after you got me hooked on A Hut, and very different books. For very different
Tonally.
socioeconomic
Oh,
classes,
yeah.
and
But also tonally, don't you think? I mean, they
yeah.
Triumph is a satire, but I think, yeah, it just felt very, very different to me.
Um, Yeah, but Toni Morrison, or maybe it was Marlene in the interview, she said that people do draw parallels between the two books in that, there are like four main characters and they're living in this kind of they're not necessarily isolated, but they're kind of psychologically isolated
Yeah,
in that they kind of feel like they're in some ways like in a cage with each other, and and the thing about Triumph, though, that is different than a hot is that it takes place in an urban setting, whereas a hot is very much on the farm. And one of the things that I just really love about the book, and you get a lot of it in this opening um, four chapters that we're reading, is just like it almost feels a little bit like a Gone with the Wind to me. There's a scene where she's trying to get Jack, her new husband, to kind of love the farm like she loves the farm. And she doesn't have a lot of success there, but she gets a spade and she picks up the soil. And just the way that like the soil's described and how specific Mila is about, the soil in this part's like this, and here it's like this, and we have to feed the soil this way here and that way there, and we have to like take care of it. It feels like that, it to me, it reminds me of that scene with Scarlett, where they're starving and she's like she picks up the ground. Um, but yeah, there's just something that's very wedded to the land and the legacy of the land that just really, I think, really is resounding in this book.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so too. And I think another good comparison is the grass is singing. Um, who, oh goodness, the author's just completely escaping me. I have to look it up. I'm so sorry. I will get back to you. But that was another. It's a South African book written by a British author who talks about the land in the same way, and the psychology of the farming land becomes so clear in that.
Yeah, there's
Doris Lessing, that's what I was thinking of.
okay, Doris Lessing. Um, there's a there's a generational trauma legacy here. In addition to like inheriting the land, Mila really kind of inherits some of, I think, the attitudes and kind of domineering manner of her mother. And it seems like she kind of felt that she could never please her mother. Her father was kind of maybe a milquetoast kind of guy that just kind of let the women do things, and you can kind of see that Mila feels like she's got to live up to this expectation, not just to be a good caretaker of the land and the farm, but also kind of be this super independent, strong, infallible woman.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's it. A lot of people think of this as a mother-daughter story, and that Mila is the consequence of her mother and that kind of parenting, and then kind of does the same thing to Agat in many ways.
Yeah, yeah. Um, Final thoughts on this book, or kind of things that you think that readers might, well, we talked about that there are some surprises in the book. Um, and I would have a hard time, perhaps, other than what we've already said, as to why this book is so memorable for me and why I wanted, you know, a f quite a few years after reading it the first time, read it again in the context of getting other people to do it with me in a group read and to talk about it, because there's just so many, I think, interesting layers to this book, and it just feels extraordinary. There's a lot of books that get published these days. It's a relatively contemporary book, but there's just something so special about this one.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I think it's so fascinating to take the history of everything that's going on in South Africa as the backdrop, and then make that political statement in the personal with the relationship between Mill and Agat, and where the power resides, and how Agat can get power in a relationship where none of it is naturally given to her. And that's the part I find so interesting.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because I mean, we know that apartheid is going on, but there's never any kind of like hitting you over the head with political stuff in terms of like what's going on a national and international level with the country. It is very much this kind of personal apartheid that these four characters are living together on this farm that yeah, it's amazing. Well, Nancy, thank you for
I'm so
joining.
excited that you're doing it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and hopefully we're going to get a lot of people reading this book, because it's a special, special thing. Good talking to you, Nancy.
Good talking to you too. Thanks so much.